I should have kept walking, but something in the silence told me I wasn't alone, the kind of silence that presses against your ears like a warning you can't quite hear yet, the kind that makes every step feel too loud, too exposed. I remember the streetlights stretching long and pale across the wet pavement. The rain had stopped maybe 10 minutes earlier, but the air still smelled like asphalt and electricity. My shoes clicked against the sidewalk in uneven rhythm because my feet were killing me after a double shift, 12 hours on my feet, and all I wanted was my bed, my tiny apartment, my door locked behind me, but that feeling wouldn't leave, that prickling at the back of my neck like someone was watching. I told myself it was nothing, just exhaustion, just paranoia, just another late night in a city that never really slept, but then I heard it, not footsteps, not exactly, just a shift in the air, a presence. I slowed without meaning to, and that's when I saw him, not the man, not yet, the dog, standing across the street beneath a flickering streetlight, perfectly still, too still, like he had been placed there on purpose, a large German shepherd, black and tan, his coat darkened by the damp air, his eyes locked on me in a way that made my breath catch, not threatening, not friendly, just aware, like he knew something I didn't. I looked around expecting to see an owner, someone holding a leash, calling him back. But there was no one, no voice, no movement except the faint hum of traffic a block away. "Hey," I said softly, not sure why, maybe because silence felt heavier than words. The dog didn't move, didn't blink, just watched me, and for a second I felt something strange settle in my chest, not fear, not exactly, something closer to recognition, like I had stepped into a moment that had already been decided. I shook it off and kept walking, faster now. My apartment was only 2 blocks away, I could make it, I always made it, but the feeling followed me. Stronger now, undeniable, and then I heard the footsteps, real this time, behind me, steady, deliberate. I didn't turn around, I couldn't, my pulse jumped, my grip tightened on my bag. Just keep walking, I told myself, just keep moving, but the steps matched mine, closer, closer. "Miss," a voice called out, too casual, too late at night to feel safe. I swallowed hard and picked up my pace, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else, and then everything shifted in a single second. A low sound cut through the night, deep and sharp, not loud but enough to make the footsteps behind me stop completely. I froze, turned just slightly, and there he was again, the dog, closer now, positioned between me and the man like he had always been meant to stand there, his body still, his eyes locked forward, unblinking. The man hesitated, muttered something under his breath, then stepped back, and just like that the tension snapped, the danger dissolved into the night. I stood there shaking, trying to catch my breath, trying to understand what had just happened. The dog turned his head toward me slowly, calm again, as if nothing had changed, as if this was normal, as if he had done exactly what he was supposed to do. "Did you just save me?" I whispered, my voice barely there. He didn't answer, of course he didn't, but he didn't leave either. He just stood there, watching me, waiting, and that's when I realized something that didn't make any sense at all. He hadn't followed me by accident, he had been there before I even noticed him, like he was placed in my path, like someone had decided I needed protection, even when they weren't there themselves. I did not sleep that night, not really. Every time I closed my eyes I saw him standing there under the streetlight, perfectly still, like a shadow that refused to disappear. I kept telling myself it was just a dog, just a coincidence, just some stray that happened to be in the right place at the right time, but something about the way he looked at me would not let that explanation settle. Morning came too fast, gray light slipping through my blinds, painting my apartment in dull quiet colors. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. 6:40. 2 a.m. Too early, not enough rest. I dragged myself out of bed, every muscle heavy, my mind still caught somewhere between fear and something I could not name. I made coffee, did not drink it, let it sit on the counter until it went cold because my attention kept drifting back to the window. I do not know what I expected to see, maybe nothing, maybe proof that last night had been a one-time thing, but when I finally forced myself to look, he was there across the street, sitting, this time calm, composed, like he had nowhere else to be. My breath caught again. This was not coincidence anymore. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room, as if saying it out loud would make it make sense. "This is not normal." I got Dressed slower than usual, choosing shoes I could actually run in if I had to, grabbing my bag with a tighter grip than necessary. When I stepped outside, the air felt different, cooler, sharper, like the world had shifted slightly overnight. He did not move when I walked past him, not at first. I could feel his presence though, like a quiet pressure at my back, every step measured, every breath too loud, and then after a few seconds I heard its soft, steady footsteps, not behind me, not chasing, just following. I stopped, he stopped, I turned slowly, and there he was, closer now, those same eyes watching me, not threatening, not aggressive, just certain, like he already knew how this would play out. "You cannot keep doing this," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I do not even know who you belong to." The word belong lingered longer than I expected, and something in his expression shifted, not much, just enough to make my chest tighten, like I had said something important without understanding why. I glanced around again, looking for anyone at all, but the street was empty. Cars passed in the distance, people moved on sidewalks far enough away to feel like another world. Whoever owned him was not here, or they were watching from somewhere I could not see. The thought made my skin prickle. "Did someone send you?" I asked, half laughing because it sounded ridiculous, but the question hung in the air anyway. He tilted his head slightly, and for a second I felt like he understood every word, like he was waiting for me to catch up to something he already knew. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm the racing thoughts in my head. "Fine," I muttered, more to myself than to him. "Just stay back, okay?" I turned and kept walking, expecting him to ignore me and come closer, but he did not. He stayed exactly a few steps behind, not too close, not too far, like an invisible line had been drawn between us and he had no intention of crossing it. And that was when the realization hit me, quiet and unsettling. He was not following me randomly, he was keeping distance on purpose, like he had been trained, like someone had given him rules. And suddenly the memory of last night shifted in my mind, the timing, the precision, the way he appeared exactly when I needed him, not before, not after. I swallowed hard, my heartbeat picking up again, not from fear this time but from something colder, more deliberate. Someone out there knew where I was, someone out there had decided I needed protection, and they were not here, but their presence was everywhere. I could feel it in the silence between footsteps, in the way the dog never broke formation, in the way the world around me suddenly felt watched. And for the first time since last night I asked the question I should have asked from the beginning, not who saved me but why. The question stayed with me longer than it should have. Why me? It repeated in my head with every step, with every breath, like something trying to surface from beneath the noise of my thoughts. I kept walking, trying to ignore the steady presence behind me, but it was impossible to forget he was there, not when every instinct I had was suddenly alert, not when the world felt different, like I had stepped into something I did not understand. I reached the corner of 5th and Maple, where the morning rush usually felt loud and chaotic, but today it felt muted, distant, like I was watching it through glass. People moved around me, talking on their phones, carrying coffee cups, rushing toward offices and routines that made sense, and for a moment I wanted to disappear into that normalcy, pretend none of this was happening. But when I glanced back, he was still there, same distance, same calm, measured pace, like nothing in the world could distract him, not even the noise, not even the people who stepped around him without really seeing him. And that was when it hit me harder than before. This was not random, he was not reacting, he was executing something precise, something planned. I stopped again, this time in the middle of the sidewalk, forcing myself to turn fully toward him, ignoring the curious looks from strangers passing by. "You are not just a stray," I said quietly, the words firm, now grounded in something close to certainty. "Someone trained you to do this." He did not move closer, but his ears shifted slightly forward, his attention sharpening, like he recognized the change in my tone. I took a slow breath, my pulse steadying as something unexpected replaced the fear, not comfort, not yet, but clarity. "So who is it?" I whispered, more to myself than to him. "Who thinks I need protection?" The question lingered unanswered, but it changed something inside me, because now I was not just reacting, I was thinking. I turned again, continuing toward the small coffee shop I passed every morning, pushing open the door and stepping inside. The warmth hit me immediately, along with the smell of fresh coffee and baked bread. The normalcy of it felt almost surreal. After everything outside, I ordered without really thinking, my voice automatic, my hands still slightly tense as I reached for my wallet, and then I realized something that made my stomach tighten. He had not followed me inside. I glanced through the glass window, and there he was, exactly where I left him, sitting just outside the entrance, still watching, still waiting, but respecting a boundary that had not been spoken out loud. "You are kidding me," I muttered under my breath as I took my cup and moved to a table near the window. I sat down slowly, my eyes never leaving him, and for a moment the world faded again, the conversations around me, the clatter of cups, the music playing softly in the background. None of it mattered, because that invisible line between us was still there, unbroken, precise, intentional. I took a sip of coffee. It had gone lukewarm too quickly, or maybe I just did not notice. Time passing, and that was when something else shifted, something subtle but undeniable. A black sedan rolled past the street slower than normal, not stopping, just observing. My gaze followed it for a second too long, and when I looked back at the dog, his posture had changed, just slightly more alert, more focused, like he had noticed it too. My chest tightened again, not from fear but from understanding. This was bigger than I thought, not just a dog, not just protection, this was surveillance, control, presence layered in a way I could not see completely. And suddenly the question why me was no longer the only one that mattered, the more important one rose quietly behind it. Who? The car did not stop, but it did not need to. The message had already been delivered. Something was watching, something that did not rush, did not panic, did not make mistakes. I sat there with my hands wrapped around a cup that had gone completely cold. Now my reflection faint in the glass layered over the image of the dog outside and the street beyond him. Everything felt aligned in a way that was too precise to ignore. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a passing car, just coincidence stacked on top of coincidence, but the longer I looked, the less that explanation held together, because nothing about this felt random, not the timing, not the distance, not the way he held position. Like a trained line had been drawn between us. I exhaled slowly, forcing my shoulders to relax even though the tension had settled deeper than that. Okay, I whispered, barely audible over the low hum of conversation around me. If someone is watching, then what are they waiting for? The question lingered unanswered, but it shifted my focus from fear to observation. I straightened slightly in my seat, adjusting my view through the window, paying closer attention this time, not just to him but to everything around him, the reflections in passing windows, the rhythm of traffic, the people who moved too quickly to notice anything unusual, and yet somehow everything felt staged, like a scene waiting for its next move. He had not looked away once, not even when people passed between us, not even when a delivery truck briefly blocked the view. He simply adjusted his stance, slightly maintaining that invisible connection, as if losing sight of me was not an option, and that realization settled heavier than anything else. This was not casual protection, this was assignment. I reached for my phone without thinking, scrolling through nothing, just needing something familiar, something grounded in a world that made sense, but even that felt distant. Notifications, messages, headlines, all of it irrelevant compared to the quiet certainty forming in my chest. Someone had placed him there, someone with resources, someone who did not rely on chance. I glanced back at the street just in time to see the same black sedan again, slower this time, not stopping but circling, and that was when the shift became undeniable. The dog moved not toward me but slightly to the side, adjusting his angle subtly, placing himself between me and the direction of the car, his body language calm but deliberate, like a silent response to something I could not hear. My fingers tightened around my phone as a thought surfaced, clear and sharp. This was communication, not between me and him but between him and whoever was out there watching, whoever had trained him, whoever understood exactly how to position every piece without ever stepping into view. I swallowed hard, the warmth of the coffee shop no longer comforting now, just a thin layer between me and something much larger. I pushed my chair back, slowly standing with a decision forming before I could second guess it. I stepped outside, the bell above the door chiming softly as the cool air hit my face again. He turned his head, immediately locking onto me like he had been waiting for that exact moment. Enough, I said quietly, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. If someone sent you, then I am done pretending this is normal. I took a step closer, closing part of the distance he had carefully maintained, and for the first time he did not step back. He held his ground, watching me with that same calm certainty, like this was the moment everything was meant to shift. Take me to them. I said the words leaving my mouth before I could fully process them, and for a second nothing happened. The street remained the same, the city continued moving around us, indifferent, and then slowly, almost imperceptibly, he turned his body, not away, not retreating, but guiding, angling himself toward a direction I had not planned to go, and without fully understanding why I followed. I did not plan to follow him, but my feet moved anyway, like something deeper than logic had taken over. Each step measured, cautious but unwilling to turn back. He did not rush, did not look behind to check if I was still there. He just moved forward at a steady, controlled pace, weaving through the city like he knew every inch of it, like this path had been walked before. I stayed a few feet behind, matching his rhythm, my senses sharper now, every sound amplified, the distant hum of traffic, the echo of footsteps, the faint rustle of wind between buildings. Everything felt intentional, even the direction we were heading, away from the busy streets into quieter blocks where fewer people passed, where the noise of the city softened into something more watchful. I should have stopped. I knew that every rational thought in my head told me to turn around, go home, lock the door and forget all of this, but that question still echoed stronger than anything else. Who? And for some reason I felt like I was About to find out. We turned down a narrow street lined with older buildings, brick facades worn by time, windows dark. At this hour the air felt cooler here, the sunlight blocked by the height of the structures casting long shadows across the sidewalk. He slowed slightly, not stopping, just enough for me to close the distance a little more, and for the first time I noticed something I had missed before, a subtle shift in his posture, not tension, not fear, but awareness, heightened, like he was approaching a boundary, something unseen but clearly understood. I followed his gaze and saw it, a black SUV parked halfway down the block, engine off, windows tinted too dark to see inside. It was the same presence as before, not identical but connected, the same controlled stillness, the same quiet authority. My steps slowed instinctively, my breath catching in my throat as the weight of everything settled into place. This was not a coincidence, this was a destination. He stopped a few feet ahead of me, turning slightly, positioning himself not in front of me but beside me, like he was no longer just guiding me but standing with me, and that shift, however small, changed everything. My heartbeat quickened, not from fear alone, but from anticipation, from the realization that whatever came next was not going to be hidden anymore. The door of the SUV did not open, no one stepped out, the street remained still, almost unnaturally so, as if the world itself had paused to watch what would happen next. I swallowed hard, my voice quieter now but steady. "This is it, isn't it?" I did not expect an answer, but I said it anyway because silence felt heavier than words. The dog remained still, his eyes fixed on the vehicle, his entire presence focused and ready, like he was waiting for permission or for a signal. I could not see. Seconds passed, maybe longer. Time felt distorted, stretched thin between breaths, and then something shifted, not outside but inside me. The fear that had followed me since last night began to change shape, no longer sharp and overwhelming but focused, contained, like I was stepping into something I could not avoid even if I wanted to. I took a small step forward, closing the space between myself and the SUV just enough to make a statement, just enough to show I was not running anymore. The air felt heavier here, charged with something unspoken, and for the first time since this began I realized something that made my pulse steady. Instead of race, I was not being hunted, I was being brought here on purpose, and whatever was inside that vehicle had been waiting for me long before I ever noticed the dog. The silence stretched longer than it should have, the kind of silence that feels deliberate, like it is waiting for you to make the first move. I stood there a few feet from the SUV, my heartbeat steady but louder than everything else around me. The dog remained at my side, unmoving, his presence solid, grounding, like he had done his part and now the rest was not up to him. I exhaled slowly, my fingers tightening slightly at my sides. "If you brought me here, then you might as well stop hiding," I said, my voice calm but carrying enough weight to cut through the stillness. Nothing happened, not immediately, no door opened, no voice answered, but something shifted, subtle, almost invisible, the kind of change you feel before you see it. The rear window of the SUV lowered just an inch, not enough to reveal a face, not enough to offer clarity, just enough to confirm what I already knew. Someone was inside, watching, measuring, deciding. My breath caught for half a second before I forced it steady again. "You have been watching me," I continued, taking one small step closer, not enough to be reckless, just enough to show I was not backing down. "Since last night. Maybe longer." The words felt strange leaving my mouth, like I was speaking a truth I had only just begun to understand. The dog did not react, but I felt his awareness sharpen beside me, like he was listening too, like he was waiting for something I could not yet see. A voice came then, low, controlled, not raised, not rushed, but carrying the kind of authority that made everything else fall quiet. "Longer than you think." My chest tightened, not in fear but in recognition that this was real, that this had always been real. I swallowed hard, my eyes fixed on the narrow gap of the window. "Then you already know I am not part of whatever this is," I said, carefully choosing each word. "So why me?" There was a pause, not hesitation but consideration, like the answer mattered more than the question. When it came it was just as measured. "Because you were not supposed to be there." My mind flashed back instantly to the night before, the street, the footsteps, the moment everything changed. "At the wrong place," I murmured almost to myself. "At the right time," he corrected quietly, and something in the way he said it made my pulse shift again, not faster but deeper, like the ground beneath me had just changed. I frowned slightly, stepping another inch closer, my voice softer now but sharper. "That does not explain why I have a trained dog following me or why you are circling my life like I belong in it." The silence that followed felt different, heavier, more personal, and for the first time the window lowered just a little more, enough to reveal a silhouette inside, not clear, not detailed, but unmistakably there. "You do not belong in it," he said, and there was something in his tone, not cold, not warm, but certain. "But now you are in it." The word settled over me like something final, something that could not be undone. I held his gaze even If I could not fully see his face, even if I only had fragments of presence to go on, then tell me what that means. I said, my voice steady despite everything, because I am not going anywhere without answers. Another pause, another shift, and then a single quiet command, not directed at me but at the presence beside me: stay. The dog did not move, but I felt the tension change, like a line had been drawn, like the next step was not his to control anymore. The door handle clicked softly, and for the first time since this began, something real, something undeniable was about to step out of the shadows. The door opened slowly, not dramatic, not rushed, just enough to reveal him in pieces. First the polished edge of a black shoe touching the pavement, then the sharp line of a tailored suit, then finally the man himself stepping into the light like he had been there the entire time and was only now allowing me to see him. He was taller than I expected. Easily over 6 feet, his posture straight, effortless. Like control was not something he practiced but something he was built with. His dark hair was pulled back neatly, his face composed, almost expressionless, but his eyes, those were the first thing that held me there, not cold, not warm, just precise, like he saw everything and chose exactly how much to acknowledge. I did not step back, I did not move at all, even as the weight of his presence settled into the space between us, heavier than anything that had come before. He closed the door behind him with a quiet click, and for a moment no one spoke. The city continued somewhere beyond this street, distant and irrelevant compared to what stood in front of me. You followed him, he said finally, his voice low, even measured, like every word had already been decided before he spoke it. I frowned slightly, my arms crossing instinctively, not out of defiance but to hold on to something steady. He brought me here, I replied, correcting him without thinking. His gaze flickered briefly to the dog beside me, then back to me, and something in his expression shifted just enough to register approval or maybe acknowledgement. He does not bring anyone anywhere, he said calmly, he follows instructions. The word settled between us, and I felt that same realization tighten again in my chest. This had never been about chance, not even from the beginning. I held his gaze, refusing to look away, even as the difference between us became more obvious in every second. He stood perfectly still, like he owned not just the space but the moment itself. Then you instructed him, I said, my voice steady despite the weight behind it, which means you wanted me here. He did not deny it, he did not confirm it either, but the silence that followed was answer enough. He took a step closer, not enough to invade but enough to shift the distance into something intentional, something controlled. My breath slowed, not because I was calm but because I refused to let it show anything else. You asked why, he said after a moment, his eyes still locked on mine, and I told you part of it. I tilted my head slightly, watching him carefully. Part of it is not enough, I replied. Not when you have been watching me and deciding where I go without ever asking me if I want to be part of it. There was something in his gaze then, something deeper, not softer but more focused, like I had crossed a line he had not expected me to cross. You were already part of it, he said quietly, the moment you saw what you were not supposed to see. My mind flashed again to that night, the footsteps, the sudden shift, the way everything had changed in seconds. I did not choose that, I said firmly. No, he agreed without hesitation, but you are still here. The simplicity of it hit harder than anything else, because he was right. I had followed, I had stepped closer, I had chosen to stand in front of him instead of walking away. So what happens now? I asked, the question coming out steadier than I felt. His gaze did not waver, not for a second. Now, he said, you stop thinking of this as something you can walk away from. The words were not threatening, they were not forceful, they were simply stated like a fact that had already been decided long before I arrived, and for the first time since this began I understood something clearly. This was not about being protected, this was about being positioned. And whatever role I had been placed into had already begun before I even knew his name. His words did not feel like a threat, they felt like gravity, something constant, something impossible to argue with once you realized it was already pulling you in. I held his gaze, refusing to let that understanding settle too easily. You talk like everything is already decided, I said quietly, like I do not have a choice in any of this. He did not react immediately, not with denial, not with reassurance, just that same steady focus that made it impossible to tell where his thoughts began or ended. You always have a choice, he said finally, but choices have consequences, and some of them you cannot reverse once they are made. I let that sit for a second, my mind moving faster now, connecting pieces that had not made sense before. The dog, the car, the timing, the way everything had aligned too perfectly. So what exactly did I step into? I asked, my voice lower now, more controlled, because this was no longer about fear, this was about understanding. He glanced briefly toward the street, then back at me, like he was measuring how much to say, how much I could handle before everything shifted again. You stepped into something that was already in motion, he said, and now it has noticed you. The phrasing sent a chill through me, not because of what he said but how he said it. Like whatever this was, it was not just about him, not just about one person pulling strings, but something larger, something structured. Something that did not stop just because someone wanted it to. And you, I said, carefully watching him, what are you in all of that? His expression did not change, but there was a shift in his eyes, something sharper, something more defined. I am the reason you are still standing here asking questions. He answered simply, and for a moment neither of us spoke, the weight of that statement settling into the space between us. I glanced down at the dog, then back at him. So he was not protecting me, I said, slowly piecing it together. He was following your orders. Both can be true, he replied without hesitation, and somehow that answer felt more honest than anything else he had said so far. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders lowering just slightly as the tension inside me began to reshape itself, not disappearing but organizing into something I could actually face. You said I saw something I was not supposed to, I continued. Then tell me what it was, because right now all I have is pieces and none of them fit together. He studied me for a moment longer than before, like he was deciding something that could not be undone once spoken. What you saw was not meant for you, he said quietly. It was meant to stay unseen, because once it is seen it creates connections. I frowned slightly. Connections to what? To people who will not ignore it, he said, and his gaze held mine with a clarity that made everything else fade. And to people who will not allow it to exist without control. The meaning settled slowly but firmly into place, not fully understood but clear enough to feel dangerous in a way that was not loud or immediate but patient, calculated. So now I am connected, I said, more to myself than to him, whether I want to be or not. Yes, he answered simply, and there was no hesitation, no attempt to soften it, just truth. I looked at him, then really looked at him for the first time, not just the presence, not just the control, but the intention behind it, and something shifted again inside me, not fear, not even resistance, but awareness that this was no longer about escaping something, this was about deciding how to stand inside it. Then stop talking in circles, I said, my voice steady again. If I am already in it, then tell me what happens next. For a second he did not respond, just watched me like he had been waiting for that exact moment for me to stop asking if I belonged here and start asking what to do with it. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quieter but somehow heavier than before. That depends, he said, on whether you are going to keep asking questions or start listening to the answers. The way he said it made something inside me go still, not quiet, not calm, just still, like a line had been drawn, and I was standing right on it, deciding which side I was going to step onto. I held his gaze a second longer, then let out a slow breath. Then start with something real, I said, because right now all I hear are warnings without direction. His eyes did not leave mine, but something in his posture shifted, not relaxed, not open, just decided, like he had reached a point where holding back no longer served whatever purpose he had in mind. You were not the target, he said, and the clarity in his voice cut through everything else. But you crossed into the line of sight of people who do not ignore details. I frowned slightly, my mind catching onto the phrasing immediately. Line of sight, I repeated quietly. You mean they saw me? Yes, he said simply, and once you are seen you are remembered. The words settled heavier than anything before, not loud, not dramatic, just permanent in a way that made it impossible to dismiss. I crossed my arms tighter now, not from fear but from grounding myself in something solid. So this is about being noticed, I said. That is it. I was in the wrong place, and now someone remembers my face. It is not just remembering, he corrected calmly, it is evaluation. My pulse shifted again at that word, slower but deeper, like something more calculated had just entered the conversation. Evaluation for what? I asked. His answer came without hesitation. For relevance. I let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. You are telling me someone out there is deciding if I matter enough to be a problem? Yes, he said again, just as simply, and somehow that made it worse because there was no exaggeration in it, no attempt to make it sound more or less than what it was, just fact. I looked away for a second, glancing down the street, then back at him. The world felt the same, cars passing, people moving somewhere beyond this block, but none of it touched this moment, none of it reached the space we were standing in. And you stepped in before they decided, I said, slowly piecing it together. That is why he was following me. I nodded slightly toward the dog, who remained exactly where he had been, steady, silent, present. Yes, he replied, because once they decide you become something else entirely. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear enough that I did not need him to finish it. I exhaled slowly, letting that settle into something I could actually process. So what now? I asked again, but this time the question was different, less about confusion, more about position. His gaze did not waver. Now you stay within reach, he said, until I decide you are no longer at risk. I met his eyes again, something firm rising in my chest despite everything. And if I do not want that kind of protection? I asked. There was the slightest pause, not hesitation, just acknowledgement before he answered. Then you walk away, he said, and you accept whatever follows without it. The simplicity of it hit harder than anything else because it was a choice, but not an easy one, not a fair one, just a real one. I stood there for a second longer, feeling the weight of it pressing against every instinct. I had to go back to something normal, something predictable, and then I looked down at the dog, then back at him. You already know I am not walking away, I said quietly. Because if I was going to leave, I would have done it already. I would have turned around hours ago, instead of stepping closer, instead of asking questions, instead of standing here now. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened just slightly. Like that answer mattered more than anything else I had said. Good, he replied, and the word was not warm, not cold, just certain, like it had always been the outcome he expected. Then you stay close, he continued, and you listen carefully. I felt my breath steady again, not because the situation had changed, but because I had stepped fully into it now. No hesitation, no distance, just clarity. And as he turned slightly toward the SUV, the dog moved for the first time since he had been told to stay, aligning himself beside me again, like the decision had been made long before I ever spoke it. And for the first time since this began, I understood something that settled deeper than fear, deeper than confusion. I was not just being protected anymore, I was being positioned for something that had not revealed itself yet, and whatever came next was not going to ask for permission.